I guess what I'd like to say as we are recording here is the program tonight, we've called it The Courage to Rest, Unleashing the Power Through Pause. And when I thought about a mission for this event tonight, although, it'll go in so many ways, it'll go in the way it is supposed to go. But a thought for me was to empower individuals around the concept of rest, and really try to pull away from this thought that it's an indulgence, and rather understand that it's this necessary step towards recharging and reconnecting with what we're calling our true self. And I say what we're calling because, there's many terms for that, right? Authentic self and essential self. I believe it's all the same, really. It's just getting to that part of ourselves, revealing, unlayering this opportunity to experience ourself in our truest form. And so as Tracee and I were talking about this prior to this evening, before coming on, this is a lifelong effort. It is for me. I'm 64 and I have been yearning for that place of truth my whole life. And I really believe that this practice was, I think, one of the reasons it was so intriguing for me is, as a longtime practitioner of Kundalini yoga, where you're really burning through some stuff and there's so much discipline, and boy, did it get me to a place that I'll be forever grateful for. But when this came along and it was like, lay down and experience yourself in this way, in this, what Tracee hopefully will talk to us more about, what we're calling liminal space, that place between sleeping and waking, and all the gifts that are there for you. Boy, something happened for me. And this is almost, I don't know, Tracee and I were saying when I went to her workshop at Omega, it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And, she does suggest in her book that you really practice this for a while. If you're a teacher, that you really practice this and really commit to it. And I did. I'm a teacher because my inclination is always, let me learn this so I can go out there and pass this great info back, on. But it wasn't that kind of thing. It really wasn't. It was a lot deeper and a lot more. There were a lot more lessons there for me. So with that, it's 7:00. We had a beautiful number of people register, as Tracee and I just spoke about. This will go out to those of you that have registered for this evening's conversation. So I'm going to begin and just tell you a bit about beautiful Tracee and how wonderful it is that she said yes to this opportunity. I'm so very grateful. So Tracee Stanley is a celebrated yoga nidra teacher, author, and founder of the Empowered Life Circle. With over 2 decades of experience, Tracee has dedicated her life to guiding others toward the profound practice of deep, restorative rest. Her work includes books Radiant Rest and Luminous Self, offer transformative insights into achieving profound relaxation, inner peace, and self-discovery through the power of rest and pause. Tracee's teaching combine ancient wisdom with modern practices, inviting practitioners to reclaim their inherent wholeness and radiance. I don't usually read someone's bio, but there is so much there that I really wanted you to get an experience of all this beautiful work that Tracee is doing. Um, I, I, Tracee, I don't, all I love to do, it doesn't even matter about the content often with you. It's just your voice, your beautiful voice. And I am so grateful for it. So thank you for being here tonight with us. It's really wonderful. It really
Thank
is.
you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Happy to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'd like to, you mentioned, that something that's coming up for you is possibly talking about grief. I know that when I invited you to come and be with us, that it was in the throes of a very sad time in my life, this sudden death of a young family member, um, and all the exhaustion that these huge events, right, can bring on for us, and how grateful I was that I had a couple of years of really practicing this, um, practicing yoga nidra and being able to call on it. Um, I wonder if you could speak a bit to just that idea of what these huge events, these huge life events bring on for us, and how when we don't listen, in fact, to this calling for rest, the impact it can have on our lives.
Yeah, I think what I notice mostly is that we are already exhausted. And because we are constantly in the doing, in the running, in the distraction, we don't actually feel the level of exhaustion. So when something in life happens that forces you to come to a full stop, that forces you to come to your knees, you suddenly start to realize that not only are you in grief, but that you are exhausted. And so to me, it feels like the exhaustion just becomes revealed, and there's nowhere and no way to catch up, right? Which is really what you can't catch up on sleep. You can't catch up. And the world is constantly telling us, catch up, catch up. There's no time for grief. There's no time for pause. You had your 3 days of bereavement time. It's time to get on with it, right? And when we don't listen to the call of our heart, we don't listen to the call of our body that is literally telling us it's time to slow down, it's time to pause, it's time to stop, then we start to kind of feel the consequences of that. And it can become kind of like a cascade of things that will continue to happen until we give ourselves that permission to actually pause and stop.
Permission. Yeah. I think in my case too that there's this idea that the body will stop you if you're
Mhm.
not if you're not listening. The body will stop you, and that can look like all sorts of things, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
we don't want to get to that point, and a little bit of, what you just said was that you had this experience and you were able to pull from Yoga Nidra, right? It took a while for you to actually have a reserve of rest within you because you had already devoted and dedicated yourself to this practice of rest. So when the time came where something really traumatic happened or chaotic, you knew exactly what the tool was that you needed. And you probably weren't as depleted as you might have been if
mm,
you had not been practicing intentional rest and practices like Yoga Nidra.
right, right. Um, there's something that I've kind of, as a massage therapist, years working with the body, and also just, of course, all of what we've done with yoga through the years. The idea that the body is the truth teller is very fascinating to me. That there have been events in my life where I didn't know something was coming and there was exhaustion before the event happened.
Mm. Mm.
Can you speak to this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the body knows. And I think it's one reason why practices like intentional rest and yoga nidra are so important, because we know that rest is healing. And I would say that yoga nidra is adaptogenic. And it's adaptogenic not just for the physical body, but for the subtle body. Right. And it allows us to realize that there's a place within us that's always at rest, that's always whole. And so the body is telling you constantly, giving us signals when something is right and when something is wrong. That's been my experience anyway. What I do also know is that the overculture kind of overrides the signals that we get. It tells us not to pay attention. Essentially, if we break it down to what the overculture is really saying, is don't pay attention to your inner knowing. Don't pay attention to your intuition. Don't pay attention to the part of you that is following things that are life enhancing and life affirming. Instead, try to outsource your knowing to this external source, whether it be a person or a supplement or an app or whatever it is. It's always looking to divert your attention outside of you. Mm-hmm. Right. And when we divert our attention outside of us, the distraction becomes so great that we actually forget that we have an internal compass. At least that's been the experience that I've seen and noticed. And once we have the moment to be able to pause, the pause is the kind of putting the spoke in the wheel that allows everything to stop turning, that rat race, being in the grind. It allows that to just stop for a moment. And then you have a moment to decide, because there's a transition there you talked about before, this liminal space. That is the liminal space, the place of the threshold, right? When you're in the threshold, you're neither here nor there. And we don't want to rest in that place of liminality, because that place of liminality is the place of the unknown. And most of us are very scared of the unknown because we want to have control. And the overculture is constantly kind of pushing you through the threshold so that you can have the illusion of control. And the fact of the matter is that we are not in control. This life is impermanent. And the more that we realize that, the more that we accept that, the more ease we will have in life, even though it's very scary, because yes, one day we are all going to die.
Right. Right. Yeah. So let's just get back. So that to many could be like, whoa, all right. I don't know if I want to go there. I want to bring something in, because this is fascinating. Something that I read when I was introduced to this idea of liminal space was, and I don't know if you've heard this, but Thomas Edison and Sigmund Freud used to do something, and maybe it was in your book, I don't know, but
it is in the book. Yeah.
Is it in the book? Yeah.
It's in Radiant Rest.
Okay. Where they used to hold a cup, right? Can you tell us? I want you to tell the story, please.
Yeah. So I would say that there's a few people. So Thomas Edison, Salvador Dali, Nikola Tesla, they all had this awareness that the liminal space was something that held not only emptiness, but also the fullest amount of potential. And in that potential was creativity. And so there's a lot of, writings about how some inventors would listen to their dreams, but they would specifically have like a metal plate, and that metal plate had metal balls on it. So they would hold the plate with the balls. They would sit in a chair. They would allow themselves to just like doze off. And the moment that you go into that in-between space where you start to feel like yourself dropping, right? It's called the hypnagogic space or the hypnagogic state. What's going to happen is the arm or the hand is going to start to drop down because you're about to fall asleep. And then the metal balls would clank on the floor and wake them up. And immediately they would start writing, or they would start drawing, or they would start creating, because they knew that there was something in that space that was beyond the mind. Wow. And I will tell you that when I wrote Radiant Rest, I was like, oh, I think I need to give this a try and see what happens. I didn't use the metal balls, but I had the practice of Yoga Nidra, which also allows you to hover in that space of the hypnagogic, the place between being awake and being asleep. Wow. And that was how I wrote the book, was from that space.
So as a writer, can you tell me more about that practice? So I want to know.
Yeah, what I did was my stepson had gone to school and his room was empty. So I basically created almost like a circuit training area. I've heard that it's called HIIT now, but back in the day we used to have circuit training where you jump from one machine to the next machine. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to create a Yoga Nidra nest. I'm going to have a place to sleep. I'm going to have another place where my harmonium is. And then I'll have my writing desk and I'll have my meditation cushion. And I would start in the morning because the morning is my most creative time where I receive downloads and information. And I would start with Yoga Nidra. And when I felt myself move into that place of deep, deep relaxation, I would eventually come out and immediately start writing. And I would not be writing for like, oh, I want to write about this subject matter. It would literally just be free writing, knowing that I am, and of course, things about Yoga Nidra would come forward because I had just been in the practice. And then when I felt myself starting to think, like to start to get into that place, because it doesn't take long, right? To start thinking like, oh, what am I going to write for this chapter? I would go to my harmonium and I would start to chant. And when I started to feel the bhav, I would go back to the writing. And sometimes I would not write on my desk or at my desk. I would write on the floor. And then I would start to notice that around 1:00, when the sun was highest in the sky, that's when my mind started to get very active. And so for me, what I realized was my creative flow was, you're not going to receive any downloads after 12:00. The time for you to really be in this place at 1 is a place of research, the place of integrating what it is that you have written now, the place of digesting and processing what you've written, because Ayurveda also tells us that that's our time of digestion, right? And so I was using those kinds of principles to help me create the book in a way that felt cohesive, and at the same time was inspired by the wisdom of my practice. I'm writing a book for people to learn to cultivate a relationship about rest, as opposed to a how-to book about rest. Those two things are very different. If I was writing a how-to book, it would have been, okay, here's how-to. This is a different book. It's about you and rest and your relationship and how to deepen that relationship.
So for those of you that don't know what Yoga Nidra is, could you just give them an idea? Tracee, I know that's a huge ask.
Yeah, no, I love talking about Yoga Nidra. So Yoga Nidra, if we were to give the Sanskrit meaning, means the yoga of sleep. It's often talked about as the yoga of conscious sleep, the yoga of divine sleep. It's known as this idea of sleep with a slight trace of awareness, right? So there have been experiments and research studies that have been done on yogic masters when they are practicing Yoga Nidra. And Yoga Nidra really allows people to move into a place of theta and delta brainwave states, but to be also conscious. And so this was something that back in the late 60s, early 70s, that people didn't think was possible, because you have this autonomic nervous system, is that if you're sleeping, you shouldn't have any conscious awareness. But through the practice of Yoga Nidra, what they started to realize is that it is possible to be both conscious and be in this state of deep, deep relaxation, if not sleep, which brings about this place of deep healing. So what I would say is, when we think about Yoga Nidra, most of the time in the West, it's thought about as a technique. And someone would say, oh, I practiced Yoga Nidra, or I teach Yoga Nidra. Okay, so if I'm practicing Yoga Nidra, I'm lying down in some sort of comfortable supine position, and someone is guiding me through a systematic relaxation of the body parts, or a body scan, or a rotation of consciousness through the body. And that's what most of us think about when we think about Yoga Nidra. And so that technique really is merely a preparation to receive the state of consciousness that is Yoga Nidra, that is said to be similar, if not the same, as Samadhi. And it's known as a nirvikalpa Samadhi, which means a place of no thought, a place of non-doing. So it is really this place of the void, of the liminal space. And lastly, but not completely, because Yoga Nidra is many things that reveal themselves to you the more you practice, Yoga Nidra is also a goddess that is talked about in the Devi Mahatmya, who has the power or the Shakti of repose, as my dear friend Uma Dinsmore Tuli likes to say. And so we all want to be blessed and graced by this Shakti of repose, this Shakti that allows us to have this deep, deep sleep and deep rest. So Yoga Nidra is many things, and you can go down any one of those avenues that call to you. But most of the time, we're talking about the technique for the most part.
So many of you that have been with me for a while have heard me talk about the rest nest. This is a term that I learned from Tracee. And so I went to a workshop with Tracee at Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. And it was an incredible, incredible opportunity. But when I came back from that, one of the things I spoke of was I literally laid down for, I don't know, what was it, 2 days or something. Yeah. It was unbelievable. And a big, big part of that was this creation of the rest nest. And then I wanted to review this because Tracee spoke of this as she talked about her process of writing Radiant Rest. And then there was this free writing or free drawing or free creating that comes after the practice. So Tracee, any given practice, and it's long, isn't it? So how long can any given practice be, like what we did?
You know, it varies. Current research has shown that you can practice for 11 minutes a day and receive the benefits of Yoga Nidra, being, you know, reduced depression, reduced anxiety, reduced insomnia, all the different things. You can look up the research study. I'll give you the link, and you could put it in the show notes.
Thank you.
So we can go for as short as 11 minutes. Most people benefit from a 21-minute practice if it's the kind of only practice you're doing and you're not doing a daily practice. And if we're on retreat, then we have the luxury of time and space and not needing to go anywhere or do anything or have a plan necessarily. So I like to be able to give people longer practices, anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes so that they can really feel what it feels like to be deeply rested, because I think that that's something that we have forgotten. You know, we go on vacation and we think, oh, I'm going to get rested. I'm going to do all, you know, I'm going to treat myself. And there's still a list generally of doing. And sometimes if we do allow ourselves to rest, what happens 3 days into the vacation, we get sick, right? Because all of the exhaustion and all of the things that we've been holding at bay start to come to the surface. So we really need to understand, and I would say remember, what it feels like to be deeply rested so that we know when we're not rested. And if we have a practice we can rely on, like Yoga Nidra or intentional rest, we can go to it when we really need it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, this is the power of bringing this kind of practice into your life. My husband now, he lays down. He is laying down every day. And, you know, oftentimes we think we just don't have that kind of time because, of course, that's our training, right? You're doing. But this, I think that was the thing when I first started working with Radiant Rest and the shorter practices that I realized was how much goes on in that short amount of time and how much it restores you. It's extraordinary. I really can't say enough about that. Dreaming, I mean, just having things come through. I do want to speak to something because I know this is something that oftentimes happens for people, be it in Shavasana or whatever it might be. Because I was with you, you know, you were in my ears, and there's these long pauses, right? There's these long pauses. It's like, where'd Tracee go? Wait, you know? And then it would end, in fact, and I wouldn't even know it had ended, you know, and it'd be like, whoa, wait. So interesting. Can you sort of speak to what goes on in the beginning like that when you're actually sleeping, or does it still have the benefits if you're not like in that awake sort of sleep state?
Absolutely. I know many people who have used their Yoga Nidra practice for insomnia. They use it to fall asleep because they can't fall asleep any other way. And so the answer would be yes, it's helpful for people who have insomnia, anxiety. When you're first practicing, my suggestion is to just allow the practice to do its work. Because if you're exhausted, what's the sense of you trying to stay awake and aware if the body truly needs to sleep, right? So allow yourself to fall asleep. And then at some point after some devoted practice, maybe for a couple of months, you'll start to notice that you are very much restored. And then you can say, okay, I think I'd like to change this up a little bit and stay awake and aware. And then you just set the intention to stay awake and aware during the practice. And then that becomes another journey.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. So, you know, when I work with clients, you know, I don't even, it's an evaluation of where they are energetically. And since doing this work with you, Tracee, I don't even start them on any practice until we have, there's some level of, you know, rejuvenation, or because they come oftentimes so tired.
Yeah.
Bone tired.
We're bone. Yeah, we are bone exhausted. I mean, it's very interesting because that retreat that we did at Omega, the original plan was to do some real like in-depth teaching around Yoga Nidra, right? And when I got there and we did the first practice, I was like, oh, these people are bone exhausted. There is no sense in going through a teaching scenario. We need to change this up, and we need to be able to have a space to really rest and to know that we are worthy of rest. Because a lot of us don't really feel that we are worthy of rest because we've been taught that rest is not valuable, and that if we rest, we're lazy. If we rest, we're going to miss out. Someone else is going to get ahead. And first of all, I would say that's not true, that rest actually helps you to be productive in a different way, and creative in a different way. That is like light speed ahead. We already talked about the inventors of our time. So yeah, it's people are bone tired. You can't do anything when you're exhausted.
Mm. Ooh, yeah, that really hits home for me. I'm going to read a quote of yours about, we just get there, ancestral healing. So here you say, in a visceral way, I knew my restlessness was a symptom of being severely tired, not only from my life, but from the lives of the women who gave me life. Stillness awakened me to how much generational weariness and bone-deep ancestral fatigue I carried. Can you say more on that, please?
You know, we all have ancestors, and those ancestors are still living in our DNA. And so no matter where you come from, whether you come from enslaved people like I do, from the Caribbean and from America, or your people immigrated here, or were the indigenous people here, there is a trauma that exists in all of us. At some point, all of our ancestors were working. They were enslaved. They were persecuted. They were running. They were stolen from their land, or they had to run from their land. And so if we think about just that intergenerational tiredness, that is something that we need to accept as part of who we are. And we have the opportunity to heal that. And when we think about healing that, we need to think about the legacy that we want to leave behind. Do we want to leave a legacy of exhaustion for our children? Or do we want to begin to take on this practice of rest as a devotional practice to ourselves and shift our legacy and shift our lineage? Because, you know, for those of us who are listening, how many of you, maybe by show of hands, had someone who modeled the worth of rest and told you how important it was to rest and to be rested? No, right? We get this idea that resting is indulgent. It's not indulgent. It's something that we actually need to do in order to thrive. You know, when I was a film producer, years ago, that was my original career. I was a movie producer, and I worked with lots of A-list movie stars, and I was making action movies and all kinds of things. And luckily, I also had the practice of yoga, and I had been introduced to the practice of Yoga Nidra. And so when I started practicing Yoga Nidra, all of a sudden I realized that, oh, I can figure out the problems, I can start problem solving, and I don't have to go through all these different steps to figure out the answer to the problem. I'm going from A to Z like this. It's like string theory, instead of going all the way through the alphabet to find the solution. And people would always say, I don't understand, how are you working 16-hour days? And how are you you seem like so alive and so vibrant? And it's like, well, because I go into my trailer at lunchtime and I practice Yoga Nidra for 30 minutes, you know? And then at some point I started to offer Yoga Nidra and acupuncture on the set so that people could start to experience that, because everybody was so tired. And so when we think about Yoga Nidra or resting, not being productive, it's actually quite the opposite. And my first, I would say, probably 3 years of practicing Yoga Nidra, I was using it. I didn't call it this at the time because I don't think I was aware of this term, but I was using it really as a biohack because I realized that I had something that was like a little secret weapon. I could do night shoots and show back up at the office at 8 o'clock and be perfectly alive and vibrant. So I really want to, I share that story just to impress upon for those of you who feel exhausted, feel like you don't have time. My suggestion is always to look at how you waste time. Make a list of the top 5 ways in which you waste time, in which you are doing something that is not life enhancing for you. And then choose one thing that you're willing to give up for 30 days and instead replace that with yoga nidra for 11 minutes every day. And I guarantee you, after 7 days, you will already see a shift. And after 30 days, your life will be shifted. I can promise you that if you do it every single day.
Yeah, consistency. This is the key.
Yeah, consistency with devotion, not discipline, right? Because that's the other thing. When someone tells you, oh, do this for every day for 30 days, sometimes it has that sharp edge, like, well, if you don't do it, you're a bad, yogi or yogini, or you're, a failure. This isn't about that. This is really about the practice of self-devotion and really cherishing yourself and showing the people in your life that you cherish yourself enough to rest. And then you start to see how it ripples out. You just said your husband has started laying down. That's what'll happen is the people in your life suddenly will have permission for themselves to be able to start laying down and resting when they feel tired. And then after that, it's like, oh, maybe instead of me getting tired, I'm going to preempt this whole thing and I'm just going to have a rest practice every day.
Right. Right. And I mean, I think, just sort of leaning back on where I started with, this huge event that happened for me this spring and having had this experience already in place, like it's a good time to learn right now. As Tracee said, things are constantly changing. We are all moving in a direction of impermanence. And so, I don't know. I feel so grateful for the years I've devoted to this kind of learning because I am preparing myself for, gracefully moving into whatever's coming. I had an experience today, this morning I had gone to yoga and come home and I was planning for this and I'm in the shower and I'm already trying to be in my office, like thinking about what I'm going to say tonight and and I dropped into this sort of unsettled feeling in my belly and like, oh, this, real uncomfortable physical feeling. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And that whole thing, when you're in the shower, be in the shower, be in this moment. But I think it sort of leans on to what you're saying, which is basically how hard it is to stop. How hard it is to stop. And I'm going to read another quote just because I really loved what you said here based on the seeds of sorrow. You said, when we plaster a good vibes only attitude over our practice, we do ourselves a disservice. When we when we dive deeper into, and I love the way you put this, the smokiness, confusion, and discomfort, we discover pathways toward healing. And I think this is the thing that's so valuable too, as we talk about this rest and this practice of stopping and restoring, is this is hard work. I don't think everyone was here, Tracee, when we talked about that quote, right? Yoga is not a feel-good practice. Is that what I meant?
Yeah, that's a quote from Indu Aurora. So that quote is, yoga is not a feel-good practice. It's a face the truth practice. And the problem is that in the West, we have created this feel-good yoga practice, get my arms tone or have a cute sheepskin or whatever we have. That's yoga, right? It's an aesthetic. It's not a lifelong practice that brings you to your true self. And that journey of realizing your true self is the journey of yoga, which also means that you have to shed all the parts of you that are not who you are, that are not the real you, all the personality, the identification, the ego has to be softened so that you can actually touch that inner light and be able to live from that place.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had an experience. I was doing a coaching certification program, and I think this was last summer. I was finishing up, and our teacher asked our group, why are you doing this? Why are you actually, taking on this certification? And the first thing that popped into my head was acknowledgement. Mm-hmm. And nobody could have been more surprised than me. It was like, whoa, where did that come from? But sort of leaning back onto these original wounds or these samskaras, my parents left. My family, as I knew it, dissolved at a very young age, at 13. And I thought I was kind of done with that whole thing, that abandonment and loss and stuff. And if I'm understanding what you're saying, Tracee, it's like, coming back to it time and time again with this devotion and this consistency and this rest, and things come up that are not quite healed yet. And they're looking for some more healing. Can you talk a little bit about just how important it is to offer yourself this?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, this idea of acknowledgement. It's something that I notice because I've asked that question of students before, and I've asked that question of myself. And what I know is that most of the time, if you ask someone, who are you? They will answer the question with their accolades, their certifications, their degrees, all of the things. And it's like, is that really who you are? And the journey of yoga, which is so amazing that Yoga Nidra can bring you to this place, is really about peeling back the layers of all those labels to find the part of yourself that is eternal, the part of yourself that is beyond birth, beyond decay, that was there before you had a name and will be there when you no longer have a body. And so for me, as a person who found yoga or yoga found me in 1995, and I started my practice with Kundalini yoga. I didn't know, I was, going to Kundalini yoga like 5 times a week. Did not know there was any other kind of yoga. I was like, oh, Kundalini yoga is yoga. And then one day the teacher was sick and I went into the next class and it was a hatha yoga class. And I was like, what is this? What are these people doing? This is not yoga. And so then I started doing both. And, it became a lot of physical, and I was an athlete. So it was like this physical prowess. And that was what I thought yoga was. And one day I was going on a yoga retreat and I thought, oh, won't it be lovely for me to take a little yoga book with me? And I went into this store called the Bodhi Tree in LA and I picked out a book that had the word yoga on the front and it was called the Yoga Sutras. I had no idea anything about the Yoga Sutras, zero. And I took this translation. It was a translation by Mukunda Stiles and I took it on retreat. And when I started reading the book, there was something that I had never felt before, which was this like vibration of truth. It felt like there was the book itself and the words were vibrating. And I got to Sutra 136. And by the way, most of what I was reading, I had no clue what was happening. I just knew that it felt something was happening. And I got to Sutra 136, and Sutra 136 is Vishoka Vajotishmati, that talks about this place inside each of us that is in the heart, that is effulgent, more brilliant than 10,000 suns. And this place is a place that was described in this Yoga Sutras as beyond all sorrow. And when I read that there was a place inside of me that was beyond all sorrow, I was like, oh, I need to find that place. And that was when I became a seeker. That was when I kind of really realized, oh, the yoga that I'm practicing, where I'm learning how to do handstands in the middle of the room, is not leading me to this place that is beyond all sorrow, that is beyond all conditioning and all of the things that have happened in life to me, right? So we talk about, you mentioned about being 13. Who am I beyond these experiences? Who is the real me? And that's really, truly the gift of yoga, is that it peels back the layers of illusion to show us who we are undeniably.
What does that feel like? I mean, I'm going to just say, like, I don't know that if somebody asked me, and I've been asked that question, who are you? Through the years, of course. Now I'd answer, I'm the one that stops and stares at a bee in a little flower.
Mm.
I, it's like these glimmers, right? Anything that catches my attention and stops me and holds me there. I mean, and I would also say that about my wounds. I'm the one that has trepidation about walking into a room and being with people that don't necessarily talk my language. You know, I I I just sort of conceptually understand that these are really big things we're talking about here. And right. And in many cases, we've all worked so darn hard for those certifications or those, whatever it might be, those places that we've come. And I guess that's what I'm finding in my life. And of course, it's different for everybody, but it's really, I really find myself in the smallest moments of my life, or they
Which
could
is
be
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, because these things are great to be able to go and have a certification and do a training. But we also have to realize that if something is taken away from us, that it doesn't define who we are. There's been many fallen gurus and fallen teachers, and many people who have gone through certification programs and spent many decades, studying with someone. And then all of a sudden, this one person does something, and then your certification is worthless. Yes. Or is it? Is it really worthless? Or is it the teachings and how you've embodied and absorbed the 10 years or the 20 years of the teachings that's important?
Thank you for saying that, because I'm a long time Kundalini yoga teacher, and we had that experience, as you well know, Tracee. And I never felt like I lost the technology. The technology was something that had always held me, but many people mourned the loss of that leader, and it was profound.
And I had the same thing happen with one of my teachers as well. So
yeah. I'd like just to sort of open up this conversation to all of you right now, and just if there's anything that you would like Tracee to speak to, please put it in our chat right now if you would. We'd love to hear from you. This is such an interesting Interesting conversation. Well, you know, we are a small enough group, I think. Open up your mic. Just go ahead and open up your
We
mic.
can just go onto the full gallery view, and people can raise their hands too. I think I see a reaction button on there. Yeah.
Great. Great. So anybody that would like to open up their mic, please do so. We'd love to hear from you.
I see Marsha.
Yeah, Marsha.
Hey, Tracee. Hi, it's Sarah. Thank you both so much. I feel like such a sponge, as I usually do, but a very full sponge right now. You know, I'm just in awe of just thinking a lot about yoga and years of practicing and thinking, even in yoga, isn't it? Well, I'll speak to myself. I always want to get to Shavasana. I want to sort of do the work, move and breathe, and then I want to rest. And I don't know, that just seems you know, it seems like life, except we don't allow ourselves. We work and we work and we work and we move and we do. But the rest is the indulgence. And yeah, it's so nice to hear your words and your encouragement and your own experiences. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's two things that you said that really resonate, which is the whole practice of yoga, the physical practice of asana, is to prepare us for that shavasana, right? You also mentioned that it's like life, right? It's like we start with maybe child's pose or on the floor, you know, and these cat cow, and then we eventually come up to these standing poses, and then we come back down to the earth, and eventually we're back down to shavasana, in this place where we're letting go, and it is life. And I think we're honoring the natural cycle of nature, which is that birth, that death, and then the rebirth every time we do a practice. And so we can think about Shavasana, or we can think about Yoga Nidra as that opportunity for a rebirth, an opportunity for a chance to let go and kind of compost what's no longer needed, so that we can rise up again with freshness and with the new clarity. So I love the inspiration of that idea of yoga practice being like life. Thank you for that, Marsha.
Oh, thank you.
The compost word. I love that, you know, because isn't it this idea, you know, that these lessons, you know, the seeds of sorrow that you talk about, that does life have to be this hard? And one of the things that I've come through with yoga is that, you know, all the learning, all the lessons got me to where I am right now. And boy, that's sure hard to hold when they're really, really difficult lessons, you know, or we're having to look through things that are so tough. And I think that, you know, then again, here it is with Yoga Nidra, you know, it's like, how do we take care of ourselves through that learning and this value, you know, of resting and pausing, and wow, that's how we do it.
Absolutely. That is absolute truth. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Christoph, hello. Do you want to open your mic, or would you like us to read from the chat? Read from the chat?
I think your English accent is better than mine, so I prefer to hear it.
Oh, I love the French accents.
And I'm practicing. Someone proposed to write for me, so I'm just letting go and see if you don't mind.
It's perfect. Yeah, I can read it actually. What was shared about finding our true nature and self through rest reminds me of the approaches of the teachings of Richard Schwartz, IFS, Adyashanti, non-duality, and Locke Kelly, effortless mindfulness. In the end, there is a few to know and practice. It is the letting go and surrender that is difficult, correct? Especially in Western cultures. So, this is not new. This is coming from 3,000 to 5,000 years of Eastern philosophy from India and from other cultures. I happen to study with the Himalayan Masters. That's the lineage that I study in. And I think that a lot of these teachers, I don't know where Richard Schwartz pulls a lot of his information from, but there's a lot of teachers who are pulling things from this wisdom. Because if we think about samskaras, I mean, we all have the impressions, we all have the imprints. We all have parts of ourselves that have gone into exile, right? And so if we can look at those parts of ourselves that have gone into exile and ask the questions why, we can come back into a wholeness. And I think that for most of what I know about spiritual traditions, most of them are asking us to recognize that we are already whole, that we are already whole. So I love that you brought these in. I don't know Locke Kelly, but now I'm going to put them on my list to read. So thank you, Christoph.
Mm.
C'est bon, merci.
Oh. Anyone else? Anything else? Well, my hope is always that, we kind of evaluate where we were as we came into this evening tonight and reflect on why you even came. Why did you carve this beautiful time out of your very, very busy schedules? But what can you do? So there's an interest, right? Something about this interests you. Tracee, what could we suggest to them? What could you suggest to them as far as a next step?
My next step for you would be to devote yourself to a 7-day practice of Yoga Nidra for the next 7 days. Perhaps you already have a recording of Yoga Nidra that you like. You have one that you like the person's voice. There's tons of Yoga Nidra practices on YouTube and Insight Timer. So you find one that you really like and you just practice it for 7 days. And that's probably going to require you to make your list of things that you waste time doing and just give that up for 1 day at a time. And then at the end of 7 days, just make some notes about how you feel. What's shifted? Is it worth it to continue? And if it feels worth it for you to continue, go another 7 days. And then evaluate at the end of those 7 days, is it worth it to continue? How am I really feeling? And keep going until you get to 30 days. And once you get to 30 days, then you can decide, is this a practice that you want to start to weave into your life in a way that is going to buoy you and help you? Because the world is not going to get any simpler. It's not going to, there's a lot going on, and there is a lot that is coming. And if we are pretending that there is not a lot that is coming, we are living in delusion. So we want to be able to have practices that can help us remain resilient and not only awake and aware in this place of deep rest, but awake and aware to our lives. And that's the interesting thing about Yoga Nidra, is Yoga Nidra awakens you to your life. you become more awake and more present. And we need people in the world that are more awake and more present than ever right now. So that's where I would begin.
Yeah, and what we'll do is we will put that in the show notes. So anything, Amy and Sarah, that Tracee, that you were kind enough to reference, we'll get those links for you and do a little wrap up for you so you have a direction to move in. I can't say enough about consistent practice. You know, it really changed my life. And it changes behaviors, it changes the way you move in the world. And this is an opportunity. And especially, you know, building a rest nest. I know when Tracee suggested that in the book, it was like so fun because I have altars everywhere, but this was like, oh, wow, I get to do this and really take care of this. And it's a no joke kind of situation. I mean, really allowing the body to rest so deeply that it's not, you know, it's not nagging at you in any way. So wow, what a beautiful opportunity. And I'm just going to tell you guys these beautiful books. This is Tracee's first book. This is the one I started with. It's just amazing. And then when was it? Did this just come out in January or this year?
The second one came out in October.
Yeah,
Of last
October.
year. Yeah.
Luminous Self. And boy, they're sisters, these two books too. They're fantastic. I can't say enough. I want to thank you. You're a dear teacher to me, and wow, carving this time out of your very busy schedule. Thank you for doing that. We really appreciate that. We really appreciate it. And all of you, happy summer to you. Take in the gorgeous sun and moons and all of it. Peace, blessed peace. Have a wonderful evening.